I'm Ava Whitman, 32, and apparently an eyesore to my own blood. You have nothing to be thankful for this year, so stay away. Don't bring shame to the family. My mother said calm as weather while trimming peonies in her pristine kitchen. The same kitchen where I've basted turkeys, burned my forearms on oven racks, and learned to keep my voice low enough to pass for agreeable. I set my keys in my palm, folded myself into silence, and walked out before the perfume of those flowers could make me choke. What she doesn't know could buy her 1,000 kitchens. 2 weeks ago, in my studio apartment with a flickering lamp and cold low mean, I matched 6 numbers and felt the earth tilt. 140 million. After taxes, 85. I stared until the zeros blurred, then slept with the ticket on my chest like armor. I'd imagined it, then the reveal Thanksgivings clatter-pausing as I stood, glass raised, and told them I could pay off mortgages. Retired dad, seed college funds, even buy the lake house that only existed in summer daydreams. A gift? I thought. A bomb. Proof that I wasn't the family cautionary tale. I was the one who made it. But here we are, banished before the pie cools, on the driveway. Drizzle stitched silver into the concrete. I sat in my car and let the heater whir, hands steady for the first time in months. Their verdict wasn't about me. It was about the role they needed me to play. The struggling one. The example. The whisper at the end of lectures. Don't become like Ava. I turned the ignition and laughed once small, honest, sharp. Secrets, I realized, aren't only for hiding. Sometimes they're for choosing. My ticket wasn't a confession waiting for forgiveness. It was a key. I could unlock any door. A home with windows that drink the morning. A life where love doesn't arrive with itemized conditions. A table where my chair isn't provisional dot this year. I won't show up to be measured and managed. I'll book the best restaurant in the city and order champagne that knows my name. I'll toast to absence theirs from my conscience, mine from their script. And when the cork cracks like thunder, I'll let the sound teach me something my family never did. Gratitude begins where permission ends. 6 months before the exile, before the winning ticket transformed my silence into power, I was just another exhausted marketing analyst in a cubicle that smelled faintly of burned coffee and disappointment. The Peterson account had imploded, and someone needed to bleed for it. That someone, conveniently, was me. Restructuring. Derek called it. His voice slick with fake sympathy as he avoided my eyes. It's not personal, Ava. Of course, it was. He'd been taking credit for my campaigns for months. When they failed, he passed the blame down the food chain like a ritual. I packed up my mug, my half-dead office plant, and the illusion that loyalty meant safety at first. I thought losing my job might bring me closer to my family. I imagined my mother's empathy, my father's quiet support. I was foolish. When I called to tell her, she paused just long enough to make it hurt. Well, she said, maybe it's time to stop chasing those big city dreams. Come home for a while. You can help out around the house until you figure yourself out. Translation. Failure confirmed. My sister, Evelyn, chimed in next, ever the golden child in pearls. Dad's office could use a receptionist. It's not beneath you, Ava. Everyone has to start somewhere. And my brother, Ryan, who thought sarcasm was wisdom, added, maybe the universe is telling you to stop working so hard and find a husband. That's what people your age do. I wanted to laugh marry whom? Exactly. The next man who didn't think I was enough unless I could cook, agree, and never outshine him. Instead, I swallowed the burn and said nothing. Within 3 weeks, I found a new position at a smaller firm. Less pay, more freedom. I was proud of myself, though I quickly realized pride was a private affair. My family's narrative had already been written. Dinners at my parents' house became entrance tests. My mother loved to perform her version of concern. So, Ava, any luck with interviews lately? When I said I'd already started a new job, she blinked like I'd spoken another language. Oh, that's good. I just hope it's stable this time. Evelyn always had advice disguised as kindness. You should network more. Maybe join one of those women's professional groups. I could introduce you to someone. Someone meaning her husband's business friends who like to pontificate about grind culture. While drinking wine I could never afford. Then came my cousin Mara, who hadn't worked a day since marrying into money at 23. You'd make such a great teacher. Ava. Summers off. Shorter hours at such noble work. Noble. That was code for modest, safe, predictable. All the things my family adored, and I had outgrown. Their concern wasn't love. It was choreography, each comment placed perfectly to remind me of my place. And I danced through it, smiling, nodding, pretending not to notice the pity in their eyes. Every Friday, I'd stop by Murphy's corner store after work for my little rebellion. $10 worth of lottery tickets and a bottle of cheap wine. The clerk, an old man named Hal, always winked. Maybe this is your week, Ava. Maybe, I'd say, laughing. But secretly I loved that moment. For 5 minutes, I could dream of a world where my worth wasn't up for family debate. Of course, my family found that habit hilarious. Still wasting money on gambling. Dad would sigh. You know the odds, right? I'm just supporting public education. I'd joke back. But every scratch, every number, was a small act of defiance, a whispered what if against their certainty. They thought they had me figured out. The underachieving daughter. The almost success story. The one they could look at and say, at least I'm doing better than her. But what they didn't see, what they'd never bothered to look for, was that failure had given me something more valuable than approval. Distance. Space to breathe. And in that space, something fierce was growing. They called it responsibility. I called it hope wrapped in quiet rebellion. And soon, the numbers on a crumpled ticket would make every one of their assumptions collapse like cards in the wind. It happened on a quiet Friday night, the kind of evening that feels like it's waiting for something. My apartment smelled faintly of sesame oil and takeout noodles. The TV murmuring in the background as I half-watched a rerun I'd seen too many times. The lottery ticket from Murphy's corner store was lying on the coffee table, half forgotten beside my chopsticks. I wasn't expecting anything. I never did. The lottery had always been a ritual of rebellion, not hope. Still, when the winning numbers flashed across the screen, I leaned forward. 1 match. 2. My pulse quickened. By the 5th, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the ticket. By the 6th, I couldn't breathe. $140 million. I read the numbers again and again, terrified that I'd misread, that my eyes were playing some cruel trick. Then I screamed. It was raw, wordless, part laughter, part disbelief. I sat there until dawn, the ticket pressed flat against the table like a relic, my heart racing every time I glanced at it. The next morning, I called in sick, drove to the lottery office, and went through hours of paperwork and verification. When they confirmed the win, my knees nearly gave out. After taxes, the deposit would be $85 million. $85 million. I could buy peace, distance, and a new identity, 3 things my family had always withheld. For the next few days, I lived in surreal stillness. I still drove my old Honda to work, still drank budget coffee, still smiled politely during meetings. But inside, a quiet revolution was underway. Every time I opened my banking app, I saw a string of zeros that made my pulse thrum with equal parts joy and disbelief. I didn't tell anyone except Charlotte, my college roommate and only true confidant. They don't deserve to know, she said when I told her over wine. Not yet. I want to tell them at Thanksgiving, I said. As a surprise, as a gift. Charlotte arched an eyebrow. Or as proof. Maybe both. For weeks, I planned it like a ceremony. I'd pay off Evelyn's mortgage, set up college funds for Ryan's kids, and buy Mom and Dad the lake house they always talked about but never afforded. I pictured their faces, the shock, the joy, the sudden realization that I wasn't their disappointment anymore. At night, I'd sit at my kitchen table, sketching out a list of what I'd give them. The irony wasn't lost on me. The family that mocked my dreams would soon live off the results of my defiance. I imagined Mom's expression softening, Dad's proud silence, Evelyn's envy turning into respect. Maybe, finally, they'd see me. But beneath that fantasy, something darker whispered. What if they only see the money? I ignored it. For once, I wanted to believe that love could rise to meet generosity. I wanted to believe I hadn't been born into a family that confused worth with usefulness. And so I waited, smiling through small talk, pretending to be ordinary while the secret of my fortune shimmered like a hidden blade. Beneath the surface of my calm dot by early November, I couldn't keep the secret from burning through me. $85 million sat untouched in an account under my name, humming like a heartbeat I didn't know how to explain. Every morning on my commute, I passed houses with manicured lawns and thought, I could buy that outright. Every evening, I imagined walking into my parents' home and finally being seen not as a failure, but as someone who'd made it on her own terms. So I decided to test the waters. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I drove to my mother's house unannounced. She was kneeling in her garden, wearing those ridiculous flamingo print gloves I'd bought her last birthday. They were faded now, like everything else she loved until it became ordinary. "Ava," she said, straightening up. "Shouldn't you be job hunting?" "I already have a job," I said, smiling. "It's going really well. We just landed a big client." "That's nice, dear." She didn't look up from her roses. "Did you need something?" I was thinking about Thanksgiving. I began carefully. Maybe I could contribute more this year. Help with the dinner costs or even host, if you'd like. Her hands froze midair. Then she turned to study me, the way she used to check milk for sourness. "Contribute? Ava, honey, you just started over. You should be saving every penny." "I've been doing better than you think," I said lightly. "I could even cover the whole dinner." She laughed, an airy, dismissive sound that stung more than shouting ever could. "Oh, sweetheart, a grocery store turkey might already stretch your budget enough. Leave the planning to the adults." The adults. I was 32 years old and still being spoken to like a child with pocket money. My jaw tightened, but I forced a smile. What if I told you I could afford more than that? Maybe even take everyone somewhere nice like a restaurant this year. Her tone shifted to surly patience. "That's sweet, darling, but let's be realistic. You're still rebuilding after that job loss. You live in a small apartment and drive that old car. We don't want you going into debt just to prove something." Debt. Proving something. They couldn't even imagine a version of me that wasn't drowning. I left soon after, smiling politely until my car door shut. Inside, the silence roared. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. For years, I thought success would earn respect. But respect wasn't in their vocabulary unless it came from someone richer, louder, or more socially acceptable. Still, I wasn't ready to give up. Maybe my sister would understand. That weekend, I went to my nephew's soccer game. Ryan and his wife stood on the sidelines, chatting with Evelyn. I brought snacks for the kids, cheered for every goal, tried to fit into the rhythm of family again. After the game, little Tommy ran up, grass stains on his knees. "And Ava, Grandma says you might not come to Thanksgiving. You have to come, it's tradition." I smiled, even as I saw Evelyn pointedly looking away. "I'll be there, buddy, promise." But as I watched my siblings laugh together, that old ache returned. They weren't preparing a place for me at the table. They were already rehearsing the story of my absence. And I realized then, no matter what I offered, they'd already decided who I was. The struggling one, the outsider. And they'd need me to stay that way because the moment I didn't, everything they believed about themselves would start to crumble. 3 days after that soccer game, I woke up with an ache that no amount of coffee could dull, a mix of humiliation and defiance that hummed just under my skin. I'd spent years working, surviving, enduring their pity like it was a tax I owed for existing differently. But now, I had a power they couldn't even imagine. So, I decided to use it. That morning, instead of driving my old, dented Honda to work, I took a detour to the Mercedes dealership downtown. The place smelled like leather and quiet confidence. A salesman in a navy suit approached with that careful politeness reserved for browsers, who probably can't afford anything. "Can I help you, miss?" "Yes," I said. "I'd like to buy a car." He smiled professionally. "Any particular model you're interested in leasing?" "Not leasing," I corrected. "Buying. Cash?" He blinked. Just once. Then his smile turned genuine. "Of course. Right this way." 2 hours later, I was driving home in a brand new silver SUV that purred like a secret. It wasn't just a car. It was a statement, a mirror to the version of myself they refused to see. When I parked it in front of my apartment, I laughed quietly, not out of vanity, but relief. For once, my reality didn't match their expectations, and that thrilled me. It took exactly 3 days for word to reach my family. The call came from Evelyn on a Thursday evening. "Mom saw your new car at the grocery store," she began, voice lined with concern. "She's worried." "Worried?" I repeated, biting back a smile. "Why?" "She thinks you've done something financially irresponsible." "Like what?" "Well," she hesitated, "like taking out a loan you can't handle just to, keep up appearances." There it was, the quiet contempt disguised as care. "Evelyn," I said softly, "what if I told you I paid cash?" She laughed. Actually laughed. "Ava, come on. We're family. You don't have to lie to impress us." When the call ended, I sat in the driver's seat of my fully paid-for Mercedes, the interior glowing in the amber street light, and felt something click inside me. They would rather believe I was reckless than successful, delusional than capable, broke than independent. It wasn't ignorance, it was a choice. My success didn't fit the story they'd built around me, and rather than rewrite the story, they'd rather question my sanity. That realization lit a slow, clean burn in my chest. I decided to visit my mother one more time. She opened the door in her floral apron, the kind she wore to play perfect hostess. Her smile froze the second she saw the SUV gleaming in the driveway. "Well," she said, folding her arms, "you're certainly upgrading." "Thought I'd treat myself," I replied, stepping inside with a bottle of wine and a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. She accepted the wine with mechanical politeness. "I hope you didn't do anything foolish. Cars like that, well, they're for people with different lifestyles." "Different how?" She shrugged. "Stable, secure, not people who live paycheck to paycheck." I took a slow breath. "What if I told you I'm doing well?" "Really well?" She blinked, then frowned, as if trying to interpret a foreign language. "Ava, I know you're trying to stay optimistic after losing that job, but pretending things are better than they are doesn't help anyone." "I'm not pretending," she sighed. The sound weighted with years of practiced disappointment. "Honey, you've always had such big dreams. But it's time to be realistic. I know what apartments in your neighborhood cost. I know that car's out of your range. And if you're lying to yourself about money, that worries me. It took everything in me not to laugh. Why is it so hard for you to believe I could be successful?" "Because," she said softly, "I'm your mother. I know you." "No," I said, voice steady now. "You know the version of me that makes you feel superior." Her eyes flashed. "Watch your tone, young lady." "I'm 32, not 12, I replied. "And you're still talking to me like I'm one bad decision away from ruining everyone's dinner." Silence. For the first time, I saw it clearly, not concern, not love, but fear. Fear that my success would unravel the hierarchy they'd built. If I wasn't the failure, who would they compare themselves to? She looked away first. "I think this conversation's getting away from us. Maybe it's the first honest one we've ever had." At the door, she delivered the blow I should have expected. Ava, she said, voice cold again. We've been talking. Maybe it's best if you don't come to Thanksgiving this year. It's been a stressful time for everyone, and, well, your situation might bring down the mood. I didn't argue, didn't reveal the truth about the millions sitting quietly in my account. I just smiled, nodded, and left because in that moment, I finally understood they didn't want me to succeed. They needed me to fail, and that, more than anything, was the reason I was done playing their game. I didn't cry on the drive home. Not once. The rain had started, thin and needling, streaking the windshield as the city lights blurred into long gold veins. Somewhere between the stoplights, it hit me not as a flash of anger, but as clarity so sharp it almost felt peaceful. They didn't hate me. They needed me small dot as long as I was the struggling one. My mother could feel wise. My sister could feel superior. My brother could feel successful. My failure was the glue that kept their hierarchy intact. And my exclusion from Thanksgiving wasn't punishment, it was preservation. They were protecting the story where I was the cautionary tale dot by the time I reached my apartment. I wasn't sad. I was finished. I walked inside, kicked off my shoes, and stared at the lottery ticket framed in glass on my nightstand, a reminder that the universe had already handed me the power to rewrite everything. I poured a glass of wine, opened my phone, and scrolled through texts from Charlotte, my only real friend. You deserve better than crumbs disguised as family, she'd written last week. And she was right. For 32 years, I'd been begging for a seat at a table that was never meant for me. They didn't see me as a person, they saw me as a role. The expendable one. The example. That at least I'm not her. I set the wine down and opened my laptop. A new tab. A new search. Real estate listings, private dining reservations, luxury travel. If I couldn't sit at their table, I'd build my own. The next morning, I called Charlotte. They uninvited me. I said simply, then let that be their last decision that affects you. She replied, don't explain. Don't defend. Just move forward. Her voice was steady, grounding. You've spent years trying to prove your worth to people who built their confidence out of doubting you. Maybe it's time to stop proving and start living. That night, I made my choice. This Thanksgiving, I wouldn't beg for a plate or an apology. I'd buy my own table, one carved from freedom, not obligation. Let them eat their pity. I was done being their lesson. It was time to become my own. Thanksgiving morning dawned gray and cold. A thin mist coiling round the edges of the city. Normally, I would have been awake early, basting turkeys, peeling potatoes, trying to earn my place at a table that was never really mine. But not this year. This year, I had nothing to prepare except myself. The air in my apartment was still, the silence almost ceremonial. I brewed a pot of expensive coffee, the kind my mother used to call pretentious, and watched the steam curl up like a quiet rebellion. The thought of my family bustling around their perfect house didn't hurt anymore. It just felt distant, like watching a movie I'd already seen too many times dot by noon. I made my decision. I wasn't going to sit in my apartment pretending the day didn't matter. I was going to celebrate it on my terms dot so. I booked a last-minute reservation at the Regent, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. Linen tablecloths, crystal glasses, a view of the skyline that looked like it had been painted just for the rich, and content. The confirmation email popped up almost instantly. Reservation confirmed. Ava Whitman, 1 p.m. Party of one. Perfect. When I arrived. The valet didn't raise an eyebrow at my Mercedes. The MacD greeted me with professional warmth, not pity. Welcome, Ms. Whitman. Table for one. Yes, I said. Just me. He smiled. Sometimes that's the best company. And for the first time in years, I believed it. They seated me by the window overlooking the city. The world below looked small and glittering, almost unreal. I ordered champagne, because why not? The glass caught the light like a jewel, bubbles rising in lazy spirals. Across the room, families and couples murmured over their meals, laughter echoing softly. But none of it reached me. I was in a different kind of peace. When the waiter asked if I'd like to start with an appetizer, I smiled. Bring me whatever the chef recommends, as I tasted the first dish delicate, rich. Unlike anything from my mother's oven, I realized something powerful. I wasn't lonely. I was free. They had banished me for being a disappointment, for having nothing to be thankful for. But sitting there, surrounded by warmth and quiet luxury, I never felt more grateful. Grateful to be uninvited, grateful to finally understand. That family isn't defined by blood or obligation. It's defined by how people make you feel about yourself. I raised my glass to the window, to the reflection of a woman they'd never bothered to see. To starting over, I whispered. Halfway through dessert, my phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. Hope you're having a good day. Love you. I almost laughed. Love you, the kind that came with strings, with conditions, with memory loss about the fact that she'd voted to exclude me days earlier. I typed a simple reply. I'm having a wonderful time. Thank you. And I meant it as I finished my meal. The waiter brought a final glass of champagne on the house. He smiled as he poured. It's rare to see someone so calm dining alone today. Maybe it's the first time I've had something real to celebrate, I said. He nodded as if he understood. When I stepped outside, the drizzle had stopped, and the city shimmered under a veil of wet light. I looked up at the skyline, at the infinite windows reflecting the world back at itself, and something inside me settled. For the first time in my life, I didn't crave their approval. Their absence wasn't a wound anymore, it was a doorway. And on the other side waited a version of myself I'd never been allowed to meet. Ava Whitman. Not the family's failure or forgotten daughter, but a woman who had finally learned that peace is what you build when you stop begging to be chosen. The morning after Thanksgiving felt strangely new. The world hadn't changed, but I had. For the first time, I woke up without the dull ache of trying to earn anyone's approval. The weight that had clung to me for years, the need to explain, to justify, to prove, was gone. Sunlight spilled through my blinds, landing on the corner of my framed lottery ticket. It glinted like a quiet promise. I sipped my coffee and smiled. It was time to start living the life I used to daydream about. Not for show, not for validation, but for me. The first thing I did was open my laptop and search for homes. Not apartments with leaky faucets and paper-thin walls, but houses that breathed space and quiet. Within an hour, I'd fallen in love with one, a 4-bedroom colonial in Westfield Heights, complete with a wraparound porch, marble counters, and a garden big enough to disappear into. The asking price, $2.3 million, didn't scare me. It thrilled me. To phone calls and one wire transfer later, it was mine. When I signed the papers, I half expected lightning to strike. Some cosmic punishment for daring to step outside the role I'd been assigned. Instead, the notary smiled and said, "Congratulations, Ms. Whitman. You're officially a homeowner." Driving to the property for the first time, I felt like I was crossing a threshold. The driveway curved through old oaks, the house sitting proud at the end, its windows glinting like watchful eyes. Inside, it smelled of polish and possibility. I stood in the empty living room, listening to the echo of my footsteps. No judgment, no condescension, just me and silence that felt like peace. That afternoon, I hired a decorator named Maria Santos, who specialized in high-end homes. When she arrived, she didn't question how I could afford it. She just said, "Let's make it beautiful." We walked through the rooms together, her notebook filling with my ideas. "You have wonderful taste," she said, smiling. "You know exactly what you want." It was such a simple compliment, but it hit me deeply. No one in my family had ever said those words without sarcasm attached. The following days became a blur of deliveries, paint samples, and design meetings. My modest belongings looked comically small inside the grand space, but I didn't mind. It was symbolic leaving behind the cramped version of my life for something expansive and real. In the evenings, I'd sit on the porch with a glass of wine, watching the sun drop behind the trees. Sometimes, I'd imagine my family driving by, seeing the house and wondering who lived here. Would they recognize me? Or would they still picture the struggling woman they dismissed? It didn't matter. For once, their disbelief wasn't my problem to solve. I had built a new life from the ashes of their doubt. And every quiet, golden moment inside that house reminded me of one simple truth. Freedom doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers your name when the world finally goes silent. It didn't take long for the silence to break. A week after I moved into the house in Westfield Heights, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. Evelyn drove by your apartment. The manager said you'd moved out. Where are you living now? For a moment, I stared at the screen, watching the dots blink as she typed again. I'm your mother, Ava. Of course, I worry. What's the address? There it was, that familiar mixture of control disguised as concern. The same tone she'd used all my life when she wanted to pry open something private. I could already imagine her reaction. The shock, the suspicion, the mental gymnastics she'd performed to make my success make sense. Without admitting she'd been wrong about me, I typed back a short reply. Found a better place. Don't worry about me. Then I turned my phone off. The silence that followed felt powerful, like closing a door and locking it from my side for the first time. But curiosity was an addiction in my family, and it didn't take long for them to relapse. 3 days later, my doorbell rang. When I checked the security camera, there she was, Evelyn, standing on my porch in her immaculate beige coat, looking like someone who'd just walked into a dream she didn't understand. I considered ignoring her, but curiosity tugged back. When I opened the door, her eyes widened, darting past me into the foyer, taking in the marble floors, the chandeliers, the sweeping staircase. Ava, she breathed. What is this place? My home, I said simply. Would you like to come in? She stepped inside as though entering a museum, afraid to touch anything. Her voice trembled between awe and disbelief. How is this possible? The house, the car, where did it all come from? I could have told her everything right then. The lottery, the secret, the months of quiet transformation. Instead, I smiled. I've been doing well, Evelyn. Better than you think. Her laugh cracked around the edges. Ava, come on. You don't expect me to believe that you... She stopped herself. But the damage was done. That you said everything. I don't expect you to believe anything, I said calmly. Belief was never your strong suit. She flushed, her composure unraveling. Mom's been going crazy. We thought maybe you'd gotten mixed up in something. Or God. Ava taken a loan from someone dangerous. The irony nearly made me laugh. No loans. No danger. Just success. Her eyes narrowed. That's not possible. Then maybe your version of me isn't. Evelyn looked around again, her gaze lingering on the art, the furniture, the space itself. Fear flickered in her expression, not of me, but of what my success meant for her reality. How long? She whispered. Have you been keeping this secret? Long enough, I said. For a moment, we just stood there, the sister who always looked down, and the one who finally learned to stand tall. When she left 20 minutes later, her silence spoke louder than words, because deep down, she already knew. And by the time she told our mother, the illusion they'd built about me would start to crack, and there would be no patching it back together. The next morning, my phone was a storm of missed calls. Mom, Dad, Ryan, Evelyn, all of them had suddenly rediscovered urgency. Each voicemail was a performance of disbelief and alarm. Ava, your sister's telling wild stories. Please call us back immediately. Sweetheart, we just want to make sure you're safe. If you're in trouble, we can help. Help. That word again. The kind they only offered when they thought I was beneath them. By the third day, their concern curdled into confrontation. My father's text was short and cold. Family meeting. Sunday, 2 p.m. We need to discuss what's going on. I replied simply, fine. My house. Come prepared to listen. When Sunday arrived, 3 cars lined my driveway like a small parade of suspicion. They stepped out cautiously, Mom clutching her purse like a shield, Dad frowning, Ryan looking uneasy, Evelyn pretending she hadn't started the fire. I opened the door with a calm smile. Welcome. They filed in, their eyes scanning every surface as if they expected to find proof of a scam. Hidden in the furniture, Mom was the first to speak. Ava, whose house is this really? Mine. That's not funny. Neither is assuming I'm incapable of owning something beautiful. I gestured toward the dining table, where I'd laid out everything: my bank statement, the notarized property deed, and the photograph of the winning lottery ticket framed neatly beside a champagne flute. Ryan leaned over the documents first. 85 million. He looked at me, eyes wide. This is real. Dad cross-checked the ticket numbers on his phone, and his expression froze. These are the winning numbers, he murmured. Mom's face drained of color. You've had this money all along? I nodded. Since before Thanksgiving. The silence that followed was heavy enough to make the air tremble. Evelyn swallowed. You knew when Mom said you had nothing to be thankful for. I knew, I said, and I wanted to see who loved me when they thought I had nothing. Their faces shifted: shock, guilt, calculation, all blending into something uncomfortably human. For once, no one had advice. No one had pity. Only the dawning realization that their judgment had cost them everything. And as I watched them squirm in my marble foyer, I felt a calm I'd never known before. Finally, the story they'd written about me had burned, and I was the only one left standing in the truth. For 3 days after the confrontation, my phone didn't stop buzzing. The messages shifted tone faster than the weather shock. Apology, strategy, guilt. We just want to talk things through. You should be careful, Ava. People will try to take advantage. Your father knows a great financial advisor. Family sticks together. Sweetheart. That last one made me laugh out loud. Family sticks together, but only when there's something to stick to. By the end of the week. I stopped answering altogether. I needed silence to think. The initial confrontation had given me what I wanted, truth. But it also gave me a question I couldn't shake. Had anything they ever said to me been real? That's when the idea came to me. If money was their new moral compass, I would turn it until they were dizzy. I called Charlotte, my anchor through every storm. I need your opinion, I said. I'm going to tell my family I'm giving all the money away. There was a long pause. You're going to what? Not really. Just tell them that. I need to see what they do when they realize there's nothing in it for them. Charlotte exhaled slowly. That's either brilliant or cruel. Maybe both, I said. But I need to know who they are without the dollar signs. On Sunday, I invited them back another family meeting. This time, they arrived early, all fake warmth and nervous energy. Mom carried a tin of cookies like it could erase decades of condescension. So, Dad said as he settled into the leather chair, "What did you want to discuss, sweetheart?" I folded my hands calmly. I've been doing a lot of thinking about the money. For pairs of eyes leaned forward, and I've realized something important. It's not really mine. I didn't earn it. It was luck. So I'm giving most of it away to charity. The air thickened instantly. For a moment, they just stared, waiting for the punchline that never came. Finally, Mom's voice wavered. All of it. Not all, I said. Just the vast majority. Maybe 70, 75 million. I'll keep enough to live comfortably. The silence broke like glass. Dad straightened, trying for reason. Ava, that's incredibly generous. But don't you think it's impulsive? Impulsive. I tilted my head. Or selfless. Both, he said carefully. You should think practically. You could change so many lives right here in your own family. There was the mask slipping, just enough for the greed underneath to show. Evelyn jumped in next, all anxious charm. Exactly. Charity begins at home, right? You could help Mom and Dad retire. Help Ryan with the kids' tuition. I raised an eyebrow. So you're saying I should make my family my charity? That's not what I meant. She protested too quickly. Mom took her turn. Voice syrupy with practiced guilt. Sweetheart, we just don't want you to make a mistake you'll regret. If you give it all to strangers, you'll never know if it's used well. But if you help us, you'll see the good it does every day. Ryan nodded eagerly. You've always said family comes first. I looked around the room, their hopeful eyes. Their forced smiles, the way they spoke like investors at a pitch meeting. Family, to them, wasn't love, it was leverage. So let me get this straight. I said softly, when you thought I had nothing, I was an embarrassment. But now that I can make your lives easier, I'm suddenly the center of the family again. Don't twist our words, Mom snapped, color rising in her cheeks. We're just trying to help you make good decisions. You mean decisions that include you, I said. She flinched. That's unfair. What's unfair? I replied, is realizing that love from my family only shows up when it's profitable. Dad tried to recover the conversation, his tone logical, but his eyes restless. You're being emotional. It's understandable this kind of windfall can overwhelm anyone. That's why we need to stay close, to make decisions as a family. As a family, I repeated slowly. You mean the same family that uninvited me from Thanksgiving? No one answered. The room went still. Evelyn fidgeted with her sleeve, whispering, we made a mistake. You made a choice, I corrected. And now you're facing the cost. For a long moment, no one spoke. I could see it in their faces, the calculation, the quiet panic, the shifting gears as they tried to adjust their strategy. They'd lost control of the story, and they hated it. I stood, smoothing the hem of my blouse. I appreciate your advice, I said evenly, but I've already decided. The foundation paperwork is being filed next week. It's going to support people who were dismissed by their families and still made something of themselves. Mom's voice cracked. Ava, please don't do this. I met her eyes. I already did. They left in silence, their faces pale and furious, their eyes full of something that looked a lot like fear. When the door closed behind them, I let out a long breath. Charlotte was right, it was cruel, maybe even cold, but it was also the only way to see the truth without illusion, because in that room, I hadn't just tested their love. I'd proven it had limits and they'd all just hit them. The week after that meeting was eerily quiet. No more frantic calls, no more texts disguised as concern. Just silence, the kind that hums right before a storm. On Friday morning, I broke it myself. I sent a message to the family group chat. Family meeting. Sunday, 2 p.m. Final announcement about the money. Please come on time. I didn't explain further. They didn't need to be prepared. They needed to be honest. When Sunday came, they arrived early again, dressed as if for church or court, the two places people go when they want forgiveness or justice. Mom carried a plate of cookies, an offering wrapped in guilt. Dad nodded stiffly. Evelyn's eyes darted everywhere but mine, and Ryan lingered in the doorway like a man facing bad news. I waited until they'd all sat down before I spoke. I've made my final decision, I said. The room held its breath. I'm giving away $75 million. The money will fund a foundation, one that supports people who were abandoned, underestimated, or excluded by their families. People like the version of me you refused to see. Evelyn gasped. Ava, that's insane. You can't just... I can, I interrupted. And I already have. The transfers are complete. Dad leaned forward, his voice too calm to be genuine. We understand you're upset, but this is a mistake. You're throwing away your family's future. My family's future, I said, was never mine to protect. Mom stood, voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. You're being vindictive. We admitted we were wrong. What more do you want from us? I don't want anything from you, I said. That's the part you can't stand. Ryan's composure cracked. You're punishing us for one bad decision. Thanksgiving was a misunderstanding. Ava, you're taking this too far. Too far? I repeated quietly. You decided I wasn't good enough to sit at your table. Now I'm deciding you're not good enough to sit at mine. The words landed like thunder. Mom's face twisted in disbelief. We're your blood. That has to count for something. I met her gaze evenly. It counts for exactly as much as it did when you told me to stay away. Because I had nothing to be thankful for. Silence. Outside. A gust of wind rattled the windows, carrying the faint smell of rain. I'm selling this house. I continued. The proceeds will go to the foundation, along with everything else. My life doesn't need your approval, your pity, or your presence. They looked stunned for people who had built their comfort on the certainty of my weakness. Now watching it vanish. Mom's voice broke. You'll regret this, Ava. I smiled, not cruelly, but finally, freely. No, I said. For the first time in my life, I won't. And as they filed out of my house, one by one, I realized the real inheritance I'd claimed wasn't money, it was peace. 6 months later, the house in Westfield Heights was gone. I'd sold it quietly and moved to Portland, Oregon, a city where no one knew my last name or my family's expectations. My new home was smaller but brighter, filled not with luxury, but with light and air and calm. The Whitman Foundation for Second Chances had officially launched 3 months earlier. Its mission was simple: to support young adults who'd been abandoned or dismissed by their families, kids aging out of foster care, LGBTQ youth rejected by parents, first-generation students carrying everything alone. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd turned my family's cruelty into a force for compassion. Every morning, I walked to the foundation's office, a renovated brick space that smelled faintly of coffee and purpose. My staff didn't know me as a lottery winner. They knew me as the woman who believed in redemption. It felt good to be defined by what I built, not by what I'd escaped. One afternoon, as I reviewed scholarship letters, an email pinged into my inbox. It was from Kevin Thompson, a college acquaintance I hadn't spoken to in years. One of the few people who'd treated me kindly back when my family didn't. Ava, I read about your foundation in an article. I don't know if you remember me, but I just wanted to say, what you're doing is extraordinary. If you're ever in Seattle, I'd love to take you to dinner. I stared at the message for a long time, a smile slowly spreading across my face. It wasn't the kind of connection rooted in pity or expectation. It was curiosity. Admiration, maybe something new. I replied simply, I'd like that. That night, as the city lights flickered outside my window, I poured a glass of wine and sat with the quiet hum of peace. My life was no longer defined by exclusion, guilt, or trying to prove my worth to people who'd never wanted to see it. The lottery hadn't changed me. It had revealed me. Freedom, I realized, isn't about money or revenge. It's about choosing who deserves access to your heart and having the courage to live without permission. And for the first time, I was finally completely free. Looking back, I understand now that my family didn't truly reject me. They rejected the version of me that no longer served their comfort. For years, I believed their validation was proof of my worth. That love was something I had to earn by shrinking myself to fit their expectations. But the truth is simple. Some people only love you when you're beneath them. The moment you rise, they feel exposed. When I lost their approval, I gained clarity. When I stopped begging to be seen, I finally saw myself. The money didn't save me. Perspective did. It forced me to see that wealth doesn't corrupt people. It simply unmasks them. My family's entitlement wasn't new. The lottery just stripped away their excuses. And while I could have used my fortune to buy their love, I realized I didn't want affection that came with a receipt. Now, I live quietly, purposefully, surrounded by people who value kindness over status and integrity over inheritance. The foundation continues to grow, helping hundreds of young people who, like me, learn that blood isn't always synonymous with family. When I walk into the office each morning, I'm reminded that healing isn't found in revenge or recognition. It's found in creation, in building something better from what broke you. So if you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, or told you're not enough, remember this: you owe no one the smaller version of yourself. Your worth isn't determined by who chooses to see it. It's revealed when you stop hiding it. Because sometimes the greatest act of revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's proving to yourself that you were right all along. Final life lesson and message to listeners. Dear listener, Ava's story isn't just about money. It's about awakening. It's about realizing that love without respect is not love, and that family without empathy is just shared DNA. She spent years chasing approval from people who needed her to fail to feel powerful. But when she stopped trying to earn their love, she discovered something greater: self-worth. And that's the message for you. No matter who you are or where you come from, your value doesn't depend on anyone's acceptance. The people who truly care about you won't measure your worth by your income, your mistakes, or your struggles. They'll stand beside you when you have nothing to give. Sometimes walking away isn't cruelty, it's self-protection. Sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's peace. You don't need to win the lottery to change your life. You just need to stop waiting for permission to live it. So take Ava's lesson with you. Don't chase love that demands you to shrink. Don't confuse guilt with loyalty. And never apologize for outgrowing the people who only saw your potential when it benefited them. Because true family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by respect, compassion, and choice. And the greatest revenge of all is living free, fulfilled, and unapologetically as yourself.